The air on Seychar-9 always smelled faintly of grain. It wasn't a glamorous colony, not like the jewel cities of Earth or the glittering orbital rings around Mars. But for Caleb Marin, 12 years old and restless, it was home. His family's farm sat at the edge of the riverband plains, where yellow gold crops waved like oceans under the soft wind. The horizon stretched forever, broken only by the silver spires of hydroponic towers and the occasional freight hauler that lumbered along the dirt-packed roads. "Caleb!" his mother's voice carried from the porch, sharp with exasperation. "If you're late again, there'll be no supper for you." "I'm coming!" he called back, sprinting from the irrigation ditch where he'd been poking around for crawlers. His shirt clung to his skin with sweat. His bare feet were streaked with mud. His father stood by the barn, sleeves rolled, grease on his hands from fixing the thresher drone. "He's 12, Mira. Let the boy run wild a little." His mother crossed her arms, but she smiled faintly. "And when he breaks his neck? Then we'll fix it with duct tape." His father winked at Caleb, who grinned despite himself. It was an ordinary evening. That was what made the memory so unbearable later. The first warning came not from the skies, but from the ground. A deep vibration rolled through the earth, subtle, at first, then growing until the barn doors rattled and dust shook loose from the rafters. The cattle lowed nervously. Caleb stumbled, heart leaping into his throat. "What was that?" he asked. His father's brow furrowed. He dropped his wrench and glanced skyward. And then the alarms began to scream, a shrill, rising wail carried across the plains. Every tower, every settlement hub, every homestead lit with warning strobes. Caleb had heard the drills, but only once, years ago. They'd said Seychar was too remote, too unimportant to ever need them. "Inside!" his mother snapped, grabbing Caleb's arm, but he wrenched free, staring at the sky. "Look!" At first, they looked like falling stars, dozens of them, streaking fire across the blue evening. But they slowed. Engines flared, hulls gleamed black and jagged against the clouds. Ships like no Terran design Caleb had ever seen, angular, predatory, vast. His father's face went pale. "Carthari." The word was like a death sentence. Caleb had heard it whispered in school lessons, muttered by old militia veterans, harvesters, marauders, locusts, a species that didn't conquer for land or trade, but harvested entire populations. "They're not supposed to be here," his mother whispered. Her voice cracked. "The Rim treaties, they don't care about treaties." His father's voice was low, bitter. He turned to his wife. "Get him inside now." The ships began to spread across the horizon, blotting out the sun. Caleb remembered fragments after that. Shards of chaos burned into his mind. The militia broadcasting frantic orders across comms. "All civilians to shelters. This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill." The earth shaking as the first bombardments hit the settlements to the east, the sky turning red. His mother shoved him toward the cellar hatch. His father grabbed the old rifle from above the mantel. A weapon older than Caleb himself, relic of a forgotten war. "You'll die with that thing," his mother shouted. "Better than nothing." His father looked at Caleb, crouching by the hatch. His eyes softened. "Stay hidden. No matter what you hear. Don't come out." "Dad," Caleb's voice cracked, but the rest was lost in thunder. The ground split as something vast descended near the homestead. Claws like steel towers slammed into the fields, scooping entire swaths of crops and the workers in them into the air. People screamed as they were lifted, flailing into the maw of the machine. The harvesters had come. Caleb's mother shoved him hard, knocking him down into the cellar. "Don't look!" she cried, pulling the hatch shut. Darkness fell. He heard her scream a moment later, and then silence. Caleb didn't know how long he crouched there, trembling, heart hammering like a trapped bird. The muffled sounds above him, gunfire, explosions, the terrible grinding of the harvesters, blurred into a single nightmare. When the hatch finally ripped open, light poured in. Not his father's face. Not his mother's. Tall, insectile shadows. Carthari. The light that spilled down into the cellar wasn't warm or welcoming. It was the cold glow of alien lamps, harsh and sterile, casting the intruders in jagged silhouette. Caleb froze. His breath hitched in his throat, but no sound came out. They were monsters. Up close, the Carthari were worse than the stories. They stood nearly 3 meters tall, their bodies sheathed in armor that wasn't armor at all but living carapace. Black and iridescent, like obsidian polished to a razor sheen. 4 arms ended in talons, 2 grasping weapons that hummed with plasma charge. Their heads were elongated, crowned with ridges, their mandibles clicking and twitching with an insectile precision that made Caleb's stomach twist. Their eyes weren't eyes at all, but compound clusters that gleamed faint green, reflecting him back in 100 fragmented images. One raised a weapon. Caleb whimpered. His body wouldn't obey him, wouldn't crawl backward, wouldn't run. He was frozen in place, a trembling rabbit staring up at the hawk's shadow. A low voice rasped in their tongue, guttural and clattering. Caleb didn't know the words, but he understood the intent. The Carthari were deciding whether to kill him. One soldier leaned down, mandibles flaring, weapon aimed, and then another voice cut across the cellar. Deeper, commanding. The soldiers hesitated. A figure descended into the pit, taller even than the others, his carapace marked with streaks of crimson pigment. His movements were measured, deliberate, and even Caleb's terrified mind recognized authority in the way the others shifted back to give him space. The commander studied him in silence. Caleb's heart thundered. He tried to make himself smaller, pressing against the cellar wall, but the alien crouched low, bringing that alien face close. The green eyes glittered with unreadable light. The commander raised a clawed hand. For a moment, Caleb thought it was the end, but instead of striking, the alien tilted his head. The mandibles twitched. A strange, clicking growl escaped its throat, not threatening, almost curious. One of the soldiers barked something in their language. Caleb caught the word repeated, disposal. The commander's reply was sharp, final. The soldiers stiffened, lowered their weapons. The alien extended a claw, not to strike, but to gesture. A command. 2 soldiers grabbed Caleb under the arms. He kicked, squirmed, shouted, but they lifted him effortlessly, hauling him from the cellar. Above, the world was gone. The farmhouse smoldered in ruins. The barn was flattened, beams scattered like broken matchsticks. Harvesters still rumbled in the distance, their colossal claws descending into the plains, scooping up screaming dots of humanity and grain alike, conveyor belts carrying them into, gaping maws that ground and sorted with horrifying efficiency. The sky was full of ships, angular leviathans blotting out the stars. Shuttles descended in swarms, disgorging more soldiers, while streaks of fire marked the militias hopeless. "Resistance!" Caleb cried out. "Mom! Dad!" No answer. Only the mechanical thrum of the machines and the alien voices clicking and rasping around him. The commander's gaze lingered on him, and for an instant, just an instant, Caleb thought he saw something impossible in those alien eyes. Not pity, not kindness, something else. Curiosity. The soldiers dragged him toward a shuttle. Caleb kicked and twisted, but their grip was iron. His screams were swallowed by the roar of engines. The last thing he saw of his home was the fields, once golden, now blackened with fire, and then the hatch closed and the world was gone. Inside, the shuttle, the air was hot, metallic, and stank of oils Caleb didn't recognize. The walls were ribbed with organic-looking panels that pulsed faintly, as if the ship itself were alive. They threw him against a bulkhead. His wrists were bound with a resin-like material that hardened instantly, biting into his skin. He tried not to sob. His chest heaved, throat raw, but he forced the sound down, biting his lip until he tasted blood. The commander, the one marked with crimson, stood over him. For a long time, neither moved. The alien tilted his head again, mandibles shifting. Then, in a voice rough with their broken attempt at standard Terran, it spoke a single word. Small. Caleb blinked at him through tears. What? The alien didn't answer. Instead, he turned, clicking a command to the others. They took positions around the shuttle, preparing for launch. The commander looked back once, eyes glinting with that same unreadable light. Then the shuttle lifted, and Caleb. Marin was carried into captivity. The shuttle's engines rumbled through Caleb's bones as it docked with something far larger. He caught a glimpse through the viewing slit, a wall of black metal stretching into the void, ridged and bristling with antennae like the spines of a monstrous insect. The mothership. The hatch opened with a hiss. Carthari soldiers hauled him into a cavernous bay lined with strange vehicles and towering cranes. Everything glowed faintly from embedded veins of green bioluminescence. The air was humid, buzzing, faintly with static, as if the whole ship were alive and listening. Caleb stumbled, legs shaking, the resin cuffs cut into his wrists. His mind screamed run, but there was nowhere to go. He expected to be shoved into a cell or dissected or thrown into some pit like the stories said. Instead, the crimson-marked commander clicked an order and the soldiers dragged Caleb through winding corridors to a smaller chamber. It was dim, ribbed like the inside of a hive. One wall shimmered with a translucent membrane instead of metal. Beyond it, Caleb glimpsed rows of shadowy shapes, humans. Dozens of them, motionless, suspended in some kind of stasis field. Caleb's stomach lurched. He turned his face away, bile rising in his throat. "Specimens!" one soldier rasped, the Terran word mangled in its alien mouth. The commander snapped something sharp. The soldier fell silent. They shoved Caleb into the center of the chamber. The resin cracked and reformed, pinning him to a low bench grown from the floor itself. He struggled to no effect. The commander crouched in front of him again. Up close, Caleb could see tiny grooves etched into the alien's carapace, patterns that glowed faintly in the green light. Scars? Ranks? He couldn't tell. The alien studied him. Mandibles clicked softly, like the ticking of a clock. Caleb's voice shook. Why am I still alive?" The commander tilted his head. For a moment, Caleb thought he wouldn't answer. Then, in that same rough Terran, came a word. Test. Caleb's heart pounded. A test? For what? The alien's eyes glittered, reflecting 100 fractured images of the boy. Finally, it rasped. Mercy! The word sounded strange in the alien's mouth, like a tool it wasn't meant to wield. Caleb blinked at him. Mercy? His voice cracked with disbelief. You killed my family, my whole village. What kind of mercy is that? The alien didn't answer. Instead, he straightened, turning sharply, his claws wrapped against the wall, summoning another soldier. Designation, he commanded in his own tongue. The soldier hesitated, then clicked. Rethkar. The commander, Rethkar, looked back at Caleb. Name, he demanded. Caleb swallowed hard. His throat felt raw, but he forced the words out. Caleb Marin. Rethkar repeated it, awkward and stilted. Caleb. Something stirred in Caleb's chest. Terror still gripped him, but beneath it flickered a strange ember. The realization that this alien, this monster, wasn't just going to kill him. It wanted something else. What? He didn't know. The days that followed blurred. He wasn't put into stasis like the others. Instead, he was kept in a small cargo alcove, half storage, half cell. Rations came irregularly, thick-paced and hard. Shells that tasted like dirt, but kept his stomach from collapsing in on itself. Water dripped from condensation vents. Sometimes soldiers passed, chittering and clattering in their tongue. They never looked at him for long, as if his very presence was an offense. But Rethkar came often. He never threatened Caleb. He never struck him. Instead, he watched. Sometimes he tried to speak Terran, halting, broken words. Other times, he simply observed, mandibles twitching in thought. Caleb hated him. He hated the way his mandibles clicked when he was thinking. He hated the way his claws flexed like knives when he was restless. Most of all, he hated that flicker of curiosity in the alien's eyes. "You don't care," Caleb spat once when courage and fury overwhelmed his fear. "You killed them. You killed everyone. And now you just stare at me." Rethkar tilted his head, unbothered by the outburst. "Alive," he said simply. "You... alive." Caleb turned away, hot tears burning his eyes. "Why?" he whispered. The alien did not answer. On the 12th day, Caleb overheard soldiers arguing outside his alcove. He only understood fragments, words like waste, experiment, danger. And then Rethkar's voice, sharp and commanding, silenced them. Caleb realized with a jolt, the only reason he was still breathing was because of that one alien. He didn't know whether to be grateful or furious. On the 15th day, they took Caleb from his alcove. 2 soldiers seized him roughly, dragging him through corridors that pulsed with faint green light. The air smelled faintly of resin and ozone, and the hum of the ship seemed to vibrate through his bones. He fought, of course, kicking, thrashing, even biting at one point, but their grip was unbreakable. He was nothing more than a small animal to them. They shoved him into a vast chamber. Caleb froze. His breath caught in his throat. Rows upon rows of translucent pods stretched into the distance, stacked in tiers like a hive. Inside each pod, a human floated, suspended in amber fluid, eyes closed, bodies limp. Some were children younger than him. Some were adults, farmers, militia, entire families. He staggered forward, horrified. His hand touched the smooth surface of one pod. Inside was a girl he recognized from the settlement, Lyra, who had once traded him a sweet fruit for a carved whistle. Her hair floated around her pale face. "Lyra," he whispered. "Wake up. Please." She didn't move. Behind him, mandibles clicked. He turned to see Rethkar looming in the shadows. Caleb's voice cracked with fury. "What are you doing to them?" The alien studied him for a long moment before answering. "Storage! Storage?" Caleb's hands curled into fists. "They're people!" Rethikar's eyes reflected him in 100 fractured shards. "Resource," he corrected coldly. Then softer. "Alive." Caleb's stomach twisted. He looked around again. Hundreds, maybe thousands of pods, each holding a silent human. The scale of it pressed down on him like a physical weight. He wanted to scream, to claw at the pods, to break them open, to wake the sleepers. But he was just a boy, unarmed, powerless. The soldiers dragged him onward. Later, back in his alcove, Caleb curled against the wall, shaking. He pressed his forehead to his knees and tried to block out the images of the pods, the faces, the silence. He thought of his father's rough hands fixing the thresher drone, his mother's laughter on the porch, the smell of grain on the wind, all gone, all harvested. Why had Rethkar spared him? The question gnawed at him. It wasn't kindness. It wasn't pity. The alien didn't feel those things, or if he did, they were buried under layers of something harsher. No, it was something else. Curiosity. A test. What happens if we let one live? Caleb clenched his fists. His nails bit into his palms. "Then I'll tell you," he whispered into the dark. His voice trembled, but there was steel in it too. "I'll survive. I'll escape. And I'll make sure everyone knows what you did here." The ship hummed around him, uncaring, but Caleb Marin's vow burned hotter than any star. That night, Rethkar visited again. He stood silently in the alcove, mandibles shifting, watching the boy who refused to break. Caleb glared up at him, eyes red, jaw tight. "Why me?" he demanded. Rethkar tilted his head. His voice came low, almost thoughtful. "One is enough." And then he left. Caleb didn't sleep. He lay awake, listening to the alien ship's heartbeat thrum through the walls, clutching his vow like a weapon. If he survived, if he escaped, he would carry this moment into the future. He didn't know it yet, but the vow of a 12-year-old boy would one day change the course of galactic history, because one Carthari had saved him, and humanity would come back for all of them. The alien ship had no nights. Light pulsed faintly in the walls at all hours, sometimes brightening, sometimes dimming, but never going out completely. Caleb learned to sleep when exhaustion forced his eyes shut, and to wake when the soldiers' heavy steps echoed down the corridor. Food came irregularly, sometimes twice in what might have been a day, sometimes not at all, always the same gray paste, bitter and cloying. Water came in shallow bowls of condensation scraped from the vents. He tried to mark time. At first, he scratched lines into the resin wall with a shard of broken shell. But the surface healed itself overnight, sealing smooth again, as if mocking his attempts. After a while, he gave up. Time on the Carthari ship wasn't measured in hours or days. It was measured in visits. Visits from him. Rethkar never rushed. His steps were deliberate, clicking softly against the floor as he approached the alcove. The other soldiers gave him a wide berth. Even Caleb, who hated him, who feared him, felt the pull of that presence. The first few times, the commander just watched. He'd stand at the threshold, mandibles twitching faintly, eyes glittering in the green light, saying nothing. Caleb would try to meet his gaze, then flinch away. Sometimes he shouted, sometimes he stayed silent, but Rethkar never reacted. On the fourth visit, the alien spoke. "You eat?" The words were halting, broken. His mandibles clicked strangely around the syllables. Caleb blinked at him, startled. "What?" Rethkar tilted his head. "Eat? Live?" Caleb's stomach growled loudly in the silence. Heat rushed to his face. He hated that the alien could see his hunger. "Barely," he muttered. Rethkar studied him a moment longer, then tapped the wall. A soldier entered, dropped an extra ration pod onto the floor, and left without a sound. Caleb stared at it, then at Rethkar. Suspicion gnawed at him. "Why?" The alien didn't answer. He just turned and left. Days, or what felt like days, blurred together. Caleb tried to test the alien's patience. When Rethkar visited, he shouted at him, cursed him, demanded to be let go. Once, in a fit of rage, he even threw the half-eaten ration pod at him. The pod bounced harmlessly off the commander's chest plate and splattered paste down his carapace. The soldiers bristled, weapons half raised. But Rethkar only lifted one claw. They froze. Slowly, the commander wiped the paste from his armor. His mandibles clicked, not in anger but amusement. Then he turned and left, leaving Caleb trembling with confused fury. On the seventh visit, Rethkar brought something different. Not food, not water. A slate. It was thin, flexible, glowing faintly with green script. He placed it on the floor of the alcove and gestured. Caleb frowned. "What is this?" "Learn," Rethkar rasped. The slate shifted, the alien characters warping, reshaping into clumsy Terran letters. A word appeared. Water. Caleb's eyes widened. He looked at Rethkar, then back at the slate. Tentatively, he touched it. The letters rippled, changing into the Carthari glyph. Rethkar crouched low, mandibles twitching. "You." Speak. Caleb's throat tightened. You want me to learn your language? Test. The word again. Always the word. Caleb's hands shook as he picked up the slate. He hated it. He hated him. But a spark flickered in his chest. Not hope, but something close to it. If he learned their language, maybe he could understand them. Maybe he could find a way out. So he studied. The lessons were strange, jagged, full of frustration. Carthari words clattered with harsh clicks and guttural sounds that scraped Caleb's throat raw when he tried to mimic them. Rethkar corrected, him with patient sharpness, mandibles snapping in emphasis. Sometimes Caleb refused. He'd cross his arms, glower, stay silent. But Rethkar never punished him. He just waited, unmoving, until the silence became unbearable. Other times, Caleb tried, and to his own disgust, succeeded. The words slowly began to stick. He learned food, water, alive, mercy, and Rethkar learned too. His Terran grew less broken, less halting, still rough, still heavy with the rasp of alien mandibles, but clearer. You, strong, he said once, after Caleb struggled through a full sentence. I'm not strong, Caleb snapped. I'm just trying to survive. The alien tilted his head. Survive is strength. One night, or what he thought was night. Caleb dreamed of the pods. He saw Lyra's face, pale behind the glass, her mouth opening in a scream he couldn't hear. He woke gasping, clawing at the walls. Rethkar was there, watching silently. Caleb glared at him, chest heaving. Why me? Why not put me in a pod with the others? The alien studied him for a long, heavy moment. His mandibles shifted, because one is enough. Caleb shivered. The slate became Caleb's lifeline. He hated it at first. Hated the alien. Script, the guttural sounds, the way his throat ached from trying to mimic Rethkar's rasping syllables. But he hated helplessness more. Each word he learned was a weapon, a tool. At night, he whispered the words to himself, carving them into memory. Alive, water, small, mercy. Sometimes he even dreamed in them. The soldiers didn't share Rethkar's patience. One day, while Caleb sat hunched over the slate, practicing glyphs, a pair of guards clattered into the alcove. Their eyes glittered green in the half-light. One snatched the slate from his hands, mandibles snapping in amusement. Waste! The soldier rasped, turning the slate over. He clicked something to his companion. Both chittered. Laughter. Caleb's chest burned. Give it back! He shouted. They ignored him. One held the slate out of reach while the other poked him in the chest with the butt of his weapon, hard enough to make him stumble back. Fragile, the soldier said in broken Terran, a sneer dripping from the alien. Syllables. Caleb's vision blurred with hot tears. He lunged for the slate and was swatted aside like an insect. His shoulder cracked against the wall. Pain exploded through him. The soldiers chittered again, louder this time. Caleb curled, clutching his arm, hating himself for the tears on his face, hating them for their laughter. And then the chamber darkened. Rethkar filled the doorway. The laughter died instantly. The soldiers stiffened. One dropped the slate. It hit the floor with a flat smack. Rethkar's mandibles clicked once, not loud, but sharp as a blade. He spoke a single command in their tongue. The two soldiers froze. Then, reluctantly, they backed out of the alcove, heads lowered. The commander stooped, picked up the slate, and set it carefully back in Caleb's lap. Caleb looked up, stunned. Why? He whispered. Rethakar's compound eyes glittered with fractured light. Test, he said again. Caleb's hands shook as he clutched the slate. He wanted to scream at the alien, to throw it at his face and demand real answers. But he couldn't. Not now. He bowed his head over the slate, fury and confusion mixing until he thought he might choke on it. After that, Rethkar's visits changed. He still brought lessons, still insisted on words, but now there were questions. 2. You remember home? The question struck like a knife. Caleb's breath hitched. His chest ached with sudden raw memory, the smell of grain on the wind, his father's grease-stained hands, his mother's laughter. Yes, he said hoarsely. Rethkar tilted his head. What? Color? Caleb blinked at him, confused. What color? Sky, ground, home. The boy swallowed. He stared at the slate, at the alien script glowing faintly on its surface. Blue sky, gold fields, green river. Rethkar's mandibles clicked softly, a strange sound, almost contemplative. Green, he repeated slowly, as if testing the shape of the word. Caleb hated himself for answering, hated himself for giving the alien pieces of the home he'd destroyed. But the questions kept coming. Small things, details. What sound? Bird? What smell? Food? Child? Game! And Caleb, despite himself, answered. Because some part of him needed to say the words aloud, to keep those things real, to stop them from slipping away into the silence of memory. But the more he spoke, the more the hatred burned in his chest. One evening after Rethkar left, Caleb pressed his forehead to the slate and whispered through clenched teeth, I'll remember it all, and one day I'll tell it to someone who can kill you. The ship hummed around him, silent, listening. On what might have been the 40th day, Rethkar did something different. He brought Caleb out of the alcove. The guards bristled, but one gesture silenced them. Rethkar led Caleb through twisting corridors, past resin walls that pulsed with faint light, past chambers where soldiers hunched over consoles that weren't consoles at all, but grown plates of chitinous material. Finally, they entered a chamber with a wide viewport. Caleb gasped. Stars stretched across the void, brilliant, cold, endless. For the first time since Seshar 9, he saw the galaxy itself, unbroken, beautiful. But the beauty shattered when he saw the other ships. Dozens of them. Hundreds. Each shaped like an insectile predator, wings of steel spread wide, their hulls blotting the starlight, the swarm. Caleb pressed against the viewport, throat tight. How many? He whispered. Rethkar stood beside him, silent for a long time. Then softly, enough. They walked deeper into the ship, Rethkar's stride steady, Caleb hurrying to keep up with his long, deliberate steps. The halls bent and curved like the inside of some colossal creature. Veins of faint green light pulsed in the walls, and the air carried the low vibration of the ship's endless heart. Caleb hated it here. Hated the hum, the smell of resin and oil, the way the very walls seemed to breathe. But more than that, he hated the silence of being the only human awake. That silence broke when Rethkar led him into another chamber. The air was cool, misted. Rows of pods stretched into the dark, just like the ones Caleb had seen before, but here some were open. Caleb froze. A group of humans sat on the floor, blinking dazedly, their eyes dull. Their movements were slow, clumsy, as if they'd been pulled too soon from deep sleep. Tubes dangled from their arms and necks, pulsing faintly with green fluid. Caleb's chest clenched. What? What did you do to them? Rethkar's mandibles clicked. Trial! Caleb spun toward him, fists balled. They're not animals. The alien studied him, unmoved. Animals? No, resources. The word echoed like a slap. One of the humans, a man in his 40s, hair streaked with gray, looked up. His eyes flicked to Caleb. For a heartbeat, recognition lit in them. Then it faded, dull and distant. Caleb's breath hitched. He pressed against the barrier separating them, shouting, Hey! It's me, Caleb, from Seshar. The man's lips moved, but no sound came. His eyes slid away. "Why?" Caleb demanded, voice raw. "Why wake them like this? Why not let them live?" Rethkar tilted his head. "To know. How much survive?" The words landed heavy in Caleb's chest. He staggered back, bile rising in his throat. "They're not your experiment?" he screamed. "They're my people." The chamber went quiet except for the hum of the ship. For a long time, Rethkar said nothing. Then slowly, he crouched, bringing his glittering eyes level with Caleb's. "You." Different. Caleb's pulse thundered in his ears. "Different? How?" "You fight. You remember. You burn." Caleb blinked. Anger and confusion tangled in his chest. "So what? That makes me a better specimen?" The alien's mandibles clicked softly. Not quite amusement, not quite sorrow. Something else. "Maybe," Rethkar rasped. That night, back in his alcove, Caleb curled against the wall, trembling. The image of the dazed captives haunted him. The emptiness in their eyes, the tubes in their skin, the way their humanity seemed to have been drained, siphoned away into something the Carthari could measure and discard. He pressed his forehead to his knees and whispered through clenched teeth, "I won't end like that. I won't let you take me apart." The vow burned in his chest, fiercer than before. The next lesson, Caleb refused to speak. Rethkar entered, slate and claw, but Caleb only glared at him. When the alien placed the slate on the floor, Caleb shoved it back with his foot. "No." Rethkar tilted his head. "No?" Caleb's voice shook, but he forced the words out. "I'm not your test subject. I won't help you." The alien crouched, mandibles twitching. "Help? No! Learn!" Caleb spat the words like venom. "Learn what? How to talk before you kill us?" For the first time, Rethkar went very still. His compound eyes glittered, reflecting Caleb in 100 fractured shards. Then he spoke, voice lower than before. "Not kill, understand." The words hung in the air. Caleb's throat tightened. He didn't know whether to laugh or scream. "You call this understanding? Locking people in pods, draining them? That's not understanding? That's—" His voice cracked. "That's butchery." Rethkar's mandibles clicked once, sharply. He straightened, turning toward the door. At the threshold, he paused. Without looking back, he rasped, "We learn by breaking." Then he left. Caleb slumped against the wall, shaking. He hated him. He hated him more than anything. But beneath the hatred, a new fire flickered. If this was what the Carthari called learning, then Caleb would teach them something else. He would teach them what happened when you spared one human. The slate sat untouched in the corner of the alcove. Caleb hadn't looked at it since Rethkar's last words. "We learn by breaking." The phrase looped in his mind, gnawing at him, poisoning every breath. He thought of his parents, of Lyra, of the dazed captives with hollow eyes. He thought of the sky over Seychar Nai, blue and endless. And he thought of the Carthari, reducing it all to an experiment. Something inside him cracked. When Rethkar returned, Caleb didn't wait. "You're a liar," he spat, voice shaking. The alien paused at the threshold. His mandibles clicked once. Surprise, maybe, but not anger. Caleb stood, fists clenched. His whole body trembled, but the words poured out. "You say you want to understand. You say you want to learn, but all you do is destroy. You kill and harvest and break and call it knowledge." His voice cracked. "That's not understanding. That's cowardice." The chamber went silent. Rethkar stepped closer, slow, deliberate. His eyes glittered, reflecting Caleb in 1,000 broken pieces. For the first time, his voice came low, almost weary. "It is our way." Caleb shook his head violently. "Then your way is wrong." The words echoed, fierce. defiant. The alien froze. His mandibles twitched once, twice. Caleb's heart pounded. He expected a blow, a claw across his throat, soldiers bursting in to drag him away. But nothing came. Instead, Rethkar crouched low, bringing his face close to Caleb's. The boy could see the fine etchings on his carapace, the faint bioluminescence pulsing beneath the plates. "You burn," the alien rasped softly. "Still. Even broken." Caleb glared at him through tears. "I'm not broken. I never will be." The alien studied him for a long, heavy moment. Then, slowly, he stood. Without another word, he turned and left the alcove, the door sealing shut behind him. Caleb collapsed against the wall, shaking. His body felt like glass about to shatter, but inside, something burned brighter than ever. He knew then that survival wasn't enough. It wasn't enough to live while others rotted in pods. It wasn't enough to carry memories of fields and rivers, while his people became resources. No, he would survive, yes. But more than that, he would return. One day, somehow, he would bring humanity back to this place. And when they came, they wouldn't just fight. They would teach. They would teach the Carthari what it meant to spare a human. That night, as he drifted into uneasy sleep, Caleb whispered into the humming dark, "You think I'm your experiment. But you're wrong." His voice was barely a breath, but it carried the weight of iron. "I'm yours." The ship pulsed around him, silent and uncaring, but the vow burned hotter than ever, searing itself into the boy's bones. And in the shadows of the corridor, unseen, Rethkar lingered. For a moment longer than usual, mandibles clicking softly in thought before fading into the dark.